Hello, good morning, and welcome to day 9 of the GBDURO. It is 9:45 in the morning, and I'm pleased to report that we have a winner. Looks like Tom Downs made it to John O'Groats just in the last few minutes there. I see congratulations rolling in the Riders WhatsApp group, and it's recent enough that our media group is still fairly quiet while everyone grabs their photos and gets stuff ready to make more polished publications than what I'm doing here right now. Tom worked his way through the night. It looked like it was pretty slow going through Dalchreichart. And we can see Reese is coming up on it now, just doing that little run down the tarmac road from Altnahara, and will then be making his way through the bog. Congratulations to Tom. Really pleased to see you there, and can't wait to hear more about that story as the day goes on. Obviously, the story of the GBDURO is far from over. We've still got Reese to finish probably by this evening. It's not all that far, but could be fairly slow. Timo looks like maybe there's another night in it. He's just headed into the Path of 1,000 Puddles, and will then do final resupply in Conton before potentially making a plan to see whether he's going to try to do it through the night and finish up as soon as possible, or whether he's going to be a bit kinder to himself and take it a little easier. It probably shouldn't hang about too long, though, because we see Rich is down the Dalrioch, out of Fort Augustus, and making that next climb up to, what is the name of that wind farm? It's not Dundragon. Dundragon's here. This one is Dalrioch. So climbing up to Dalrioch, where Kerry was talking about it being a bit eerie, having the turbines turning in the night. Looks like he's going to have a nice, bright, sunny day for it, though. Our 4Rs are still hanging about as they were. So Ross Phoenix is running along Loch Lagan now, which is a lovely bit of the route, assuming he's not getting plagued with midges. Where are we? This is Roop, who is up and over Kenknock and into Glen Lyon, headed along towards the Glen Lyon post office. We might get a little bit of an update from him there if he stops at the cafe before heading over the tough, chunky gravel section that Sam was telling us about. If you've ridden the GBDURO, there's kind of a bonus segment, GBDURO, the Scott Duro, another racing collective adventure. There's a bonus segment there called Be More Mike, dedicated to the late Mike Hall, who is the inspiration behind an awful lot of the ultra community. Rob Weir taking a break in Calendar. Looks like, I would guess that's a lazy breakfast, maybe at the More Pie Shop, the More Bread Shop. There's a whole little group of bakeries and fun cafes and stuff there. So he'll be making his way through that relatively easy bit along Strathire, Lochern Head, and up to Killin over the next little while. We've got a decent gap back to Mike, to Dan, both crossing the central belt just now. Can kind of see Mike's just gone over the M8, which is our main motorway that connects Glasgow and Edinburgh. So properly right in the middle of it all. And Dan's on his way in. Again, looks like maybe stopped for a break. Jo making her way out of the southern uplands, out of what I would call the borderlands, and headed into Broughton and Biggar. Lanarkshire borders? I'm not sure. Could class as both. I would say more Lanarkshire than borders. But certainly making that cross at the moment. May see a stop somewhere in here, especially because she won't have seen much civilization for a while. And then we'll see her cracking on, I would guess, at least to the start of the Badger, probably taking on a big chunk of it. There's Peter Janstad from yesterday. We can see Roman is just coming into Ettrick and getting ready to make some of those final climbs up out of the borders. In fact, Dunrig is the name of that one with the it's not a radar station, it's a comm station. antenna, broadcast tower, something like that, is the big chunky climb in that area. And then sends him into the easier bits of the Central Belt. So everybody's now in Scotland. We're making our way out of the borders. Everybody's making their way to the end. I think that's probably what everyone's focused on at the moment. Let's take a quick look at some photos, see what we got. Here's Roman looking absolutely delighted to finally cross into Scotland. That's from earlier this morning. This is looking back a bit. This is that descent off of Great Dun Fell, the very boggy bit that I keep mentioning, probably less because it's newsworthy and more because it traumatized me personally. Here's Joe sending probably one of the grossest photos I've seen of it this race. Thankfully, it's behind all of our riders now. So, just a memory at this point. Rob Weir saying he had a fantastic night bivvying in the woods. I can't quite tell if there's some sarcasm in there from that emoji, and perhaps there is a giant cloud of midges that we cannot see there. I think I mentioned yesterday that there was almost no wind, even at the wind farm where I was racing, and despite covering myself in midge spray, I'm still full of bites this morning. This looks pretty painful. Mike, who's doing our plastic-free pledge, has clearly got some arthritis that is properly flaring and becoming a bit of a pain in the wrist there. Hope that's not going to slow him down too much. Also an interesting mention here for me to think about the co-op, which is so universal as the kind of main food provider for big chunks of the Highlands. We would think, because of the ethos of the co-op and where it is and all of that, that co-op would be focused on minimal packaging. But Mike is finding it frustrating that there's an awful lot of plastic, single-use plastic, in the co-op. This is the one I want to finish with, which is Tom's last post before the finish. Looks like that's probably coming out of that bird preserve that I was talking about with Carrie yesterday. Can see it looks like absolutely gorgeous, fast champagne gravel. And from there, turns into tarmac and a gentle roll down the hill to breakfast at John O'Groats and presumably a big daytime nap, assuming Tom's room is ready for him. Whatever he does, I'm sure he's going to be lying down, even if it's just on the tarmac there at John O'Groats. I've seen my fair share of photos of that. One other thing, talking about Mike just there, I got a message from Niall Shannon, who's another big racer in the scene in Scotland in ultra endurance. Finished with Neil Henderson at Mother North last week. I think maybe the one place in front of him, in fact. Anyway, Niall messaged to say, Alex, you mentioned that with Keith out of the race, there's no more Scots in the race. Well, Mike has lived in the Cairngorms for 20 years, so Mike is certainly more Scottish than I am. Wherever he was born, Mike has been in the Cairngorms for an awful long time. Another good reminder from Niall that Mike has a couple of Highland Trail 550 finishes, so between living up there and having ridden those routes fairly often, he's going to be pretty familiar with what's coming up ahead. I would say that means he's going to be able to at least pace it fairly well compared to his own abilities. So, assuming this arthritis doesn't slow him down too much, we should see Mike making decent pace from here all the way to the end. Do a little zoom out, get ourselves an overview. We can see everybody's in Scotland, but that's still a huge spread. So we're going to have news for another day or so, 2 days, certainly. And we will certainly keep you updated as that comes. Let's click over and do a quick look at our weather. What are we expecting? I haven't actually looked at this. Oh, there's that dead still perfect storm for midges. Opposite of a storm for the weather, but perfect storm for midges. 10 a.m. Sunday, playing it through. Yeah, just looks like an absolute dead spot through the middle of the country. And I guess that is the consequence of doing a route that we have effectively defined by a watershed divide. You end up in the dead spot where all the weather joins up. Rewind it back to now, change our layer to looking at rain. I'm kind of amazed. It looks like we are going to get pretty much through the GBDURO before seeing any significant rainfall, which is absolutely wild to me. There's a big part of me that's wishing I was riding it because of that, just to see what it was like to do it all in the dry and be able to keep using dry lube on the chain and all that kind of stuff. Seems like maintenance would be a lot easier, but as we've seen, our riders have not necessarily had an easier time with their maintenance. One last layer here, looking at our temperatures. And we are set up for today at 11 o'clock. Let's drop a pin there. So we've got something kind of right in the middle of the Badger Divide section. 18 degrees sometime in the next hour, so a really pleasant morning. But cooking up, 23, maybe the high. I would guess it could get a couple degrees colder than that. Then going to cool off, what did we see, 12 overnight? Where was that? 5 a.m., 12. So cool enough that we might be grateful for down jackets and all that if we're camping out at height, but probably still warm enough that it might be pleasant to camp out at height, depending on how riders are feeling. That's looking into tomorrow morning, and let's go ahead and play this out through the end of tomorrow. Similar temperatures tomorrow, hot spots getting up close to 25, and otherwise hanging out in the high teens. So I'm going to say that's our report for the morning. Congratulations again to Tom. I'll put up a specific post about that once we've got some tailored media to show off that face of our race winner. I'll check in with you all again a bit later. I think there's a chance that I may go and try to catch some of these 3 that are in the Central Belt in person now that I've gone and done my race, and would quite happily go for a much gentler pedal today. So, more later today. Thanks. Have a good one.